Well, I rallycrossed the S4 and it went something like this. That was super fun. However, the car didn't fare quite as well as I would have liked it to. It went from being able to zoom around the course no problem, to having to make a small repair while we were there, to our transmission issues rearing their ugly head again. And with that, you're probably wondering, Charles, why don't you have any bumper or headlights in? Well, let someone else drive the car, and they actually backed into a parked car, which is why we don't have a headlight and why this fender is all crunched in. Not a big deal, and the dude made it right. So in this video, we're gonna look at some of the damage that happened, and something I'm very excited about, we're gonna try and lift the S4 with an Audi Q5 suspension. And big thanks to Advance Auto Parts for partnering up with us on the car and for this video. We're gonna be doing some really fun stuff with the S4 over the next year, and I'm pumped to have Advance Auto Parts on board. We even got Emily, who works for Advance, in the driver's seat and sliding around the Rallycross course. Okay, it should come as no surprise that anytime you race or do something aggressive with the car, the odds of something breaking are incredibly high. But when you introduce off-road, a lot of elevation changes, places that if we were going fast enough, we could have definitely got air, it beats the car up pretty good. We got a bunch of our front core support that's all damaged, broken, or even missing. I also couldn't help but notice you're staring at my giant wing. The other thing we had to do is we actually had to take the bumper cover completely off. This was a product of not only the damage from the course, but the guy that hit the parked car with my car. You can see the Audi didn't fare so well. Weirdly enough, the Civic that he hit did pretty good. Thankfully, no one was hurt and it was no big deal. He made it right, so no worries there. Our main focus today is going to be on the suspension. So this S4 is a B8 generation car. B chassis, 8th generation. The Q5 that we took the suspension off of is also a B8 platform car. So my theory is, and we'll see where I'm at, if you already know this isn't gonna work, go ahead and drop that in the comments. My theory is if we put the suspension from the SUV on the sedan, it should give us more ground clearance and lift our car up. Whether it's gonna work or not, I have no idea. If it does end up working, we're gonna go back and we're gonna replace some of these worn out suspension components that really do need to be addressed. I went around to each wheel and measured for ground clearance. Unfortunately, because our left front fender is damaged, we're not gonna be able to really accurately measure that one. But at least now we have a baseline before we put this other suspension on. Now, I think I'm gonna replace this fender first. We do have some other damage that we're gonna need to address, but I actually need to order a couple more parts before we can do that. Next up, we gotta get our wheelhouse liner out. It would be the side with the washer bottle on it. One fender off. I think we're gonna have to remove that sticker there and save it for something else. Okay, our fender's out of the way, and that actually opened up a bunch more room for us to work, which is kind of awesome. Let's go ahead and get this pinch bolt out of the way. We're also gonna be committing some no-nos here by reusing a lot of this stuff. But again, if this all works, then we'll deal with replacing some of the hardware and these bushings and stuff afterwards. Next, we have to get our sway bar end links loose, our lower assembly mount bolt, and finally, our top 4 bolts, which we actually have to take a couple other things off, like the top of the washer fluid bottle, the cowl panel, and a little drop down action. Well, it looks like I'm probably gonna have to take the axle loose in order to get enough movement from the knuckle to get the whole shock absorber assembly and spring and everything out. Plus, remember, if we're lifting it up, we're gonna have even less clearance going back together, so hopefully this will do the trick. There we go, oh boy. Not as elegant as I had hoped, but we did it. There we go. That was a very ugly process. But we did it! All right, here we go. Moment of truth. I'm gonna be pretty disappointed if these are like exactly the same length. Oh no, don't be the same length. We'll start down here with this bracket. Just shy of 12 inches. Just shy of 12 inches. 19 and a half. It might only be about a ½ inch taller. I mean, better than nothing. For sure not worth the work. It's about a ½ inch taller. Does that directly equate to a ½ inch of ride height difference? I'm not sure. And links are for sure different. This one's also non-dynamic chassis for the Q5. We have dynamic chassis control for the S4. I don't guess there's anything to do but to put it in, see what happens. Now we do have to swap the upper control arms. We're gonna end up taking these back off at some point because we gotta do bushings. I just didn't get the bushings for this test. Now also, this is not gonna be the right way to do this stuff. These need to be installed in a certain position. What I did is I tried to get these two control arms pretty even. That's kind of the way I'm gonna line them up here. When we do the bushings in that, we'll make sure we get these right, which probably has to be set with the vehicle at ride height, but this is just to get them in and get them started. These bushings are destroyed, so don't worry about destroying the bushings here. They're already ruined. All right, let's get this old girl back in here. We will end up getting some faults for the suspension because we took out the dynamic chassis control. That's something, if we end up going with this, we can always add the little connector guys in order to trick the system. There we go. Hey, that wasn't too bad. Where'd the bolt go? Don't worry, I found it. Hope I'm not the only one that loses stuff like that regularly. All right, now we gotta get everybody tightened back up. Connectors and in. To make the sway bar end links go on a little easier for both sides, I'm gonna unbolt the bar here. Snug that, snug this. And then when we're all done, we'll come back and like proper tighten everything down. But right now, if I leave it loose, we'll have a little bit more flexibility with getting everybody installed. Next, we got to tend to our bolts up top here. Now, I like to start all 4 of them before I tighten any of them. You can also get a floor jack down underneath and just press up on the whole assembly to line it up. All right, let's get our fender back on next. Oh yeah, all right, we did it. We'll put the fender liner back in a little bit. We still have some brokey stuff up here. Let's hope that was worth the effort. I'm kind of feeling like it won't be. Oh, don't worry, we'll come back and torque the wheel properly. I would say that looks like it's got a bit of a gap. Oh, geez, I forgot. Don't forget to bolt the rest of the fender on, Charles, you idiot. Okay, so fender's on, fender's bolted on. Just looking at our wheel gap, it already looks like it's a bit more of a wheel gap. We measured right at 4.5 inches clearance from the top of the wheel to the bottom of the fender on the other side. We didn't measure this side because the fender was crumpled in, so it didn't quite work out that way, but let's see where we're at now. We are just under 5 3/4 inches. So 1.25 inches? I mean, that's not terrible. I was hoping for more. I was hoping for around 2 inches, but I think just for putting the factory suspension from another car on and getting 1.25 inches is not too bad. Let's do the back and see how that does. Okay, so we're gonna put the Q5 suspension on the back too. Similar process, but a very different setup. Also a lot dirtier. All right, let's see if we can get these out without taking the whole fender liner off. Yeah, maybe we'll take the fender liner off anyway. Oh, look at all the mud caked in. Oh, God. All right, now that that's a little bit better and we got access to our bolts, we'll go ahead and take these top 2 out. Let's move to the bottom. Go ahead and get our connector for our dynamic chassis disconnected. We'll get our lower shock absorber mount bolt out. Just a little twisty and a twisty to get this goofy thing out. Our spring is kind of a pain on this setup. There's actually a spring compressor factory special tool, believe it or not. I know you're shocked. That goes up through the middle here, compresses the spring from the inside, and then it allows us to swing and rock the spring out of the way. What we're gonna do is we're gonna soak this little rock guard, some silicone spray. Okay, so I had to run over to Advance and rent this style of spring compressor so that I could grab the spring on the outside and actually compress it a little bit along with our drag bag. I still had to kind of finagle it on out of there. The one from the factory goes up through the middle of the spring and compresses it from the inside, but I don't have that one, so this worked pretty well. You can also unbolt this actual subframe and then with a pry bar pulled down, and apparently that gives you room. But I did this, so I'll do the other side and then I'll return this and it won't cost me any money. Finally got our rear suspension on the left side of the car out. Now, unlike the front where it was pretty close, there is a distinct difference in height on these springs, to the point where I actually think this might be too tall for the back of this car in compared to the front. So I'm worried about a little bit of a rake. This, we'll see. We'll see what happens. And then the shock absorbers, similar. Let's try that again. The shock absorber is similar in height. It looks like it's a little bit taller. It also looks like it's a baller. So the spring will give us the lift in the back, and really, I'm glad I went and got that spring compressor because there's no way I would have got this spring in. So let's get them put in and see what happens. Also, look at how trashed this bump stop is. So once we confirm whether this works or not, this will be something that we for sure have to replace. All right, here we go. We'll get our rock guide here first, and make sure we got it oriented right. We'll get our little top pad. Then this feels like it might get a little sketchy. And ha-ha! All right, feeling pretty good about that. Now we're gonna have to get our shock absorber in. All right, get our top bolt started. FYI, it hurts my heart to put this in with this bump stop like that. But we'll get it right. No need to worry about that. Okay, we have everything mostly tightened up. I still have the sway bar end link loose because we gotta do the other side, but let's get the wheel on and see what kind of lifty lift we get. All right, give her a little bouncy bounce. About 6 1/4 inch wheel gap. We were, I think, right at 5 inches before, so we gained roughly 1 1/4 inches in the back too. Well, we did it. We lifted the S4 simply with Q5 suspension parts. Now, I still need to do the other side. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Then we'll take it for a drive and see how it drives. We also still have to fix the front end and some of the damage that was done from that first Rallycross. It's what it is. I feel like we're just gonna have to have a core support budget while we do this. I'll also am gonna look into some undershielding to up the level of protection underneath the car, put the wheel liners in and re-torque everything. Okay, let's go for a ride and see how it does. I can already tell you there's some creaking in the suspension. That's to be expected. We saw how completely worn out the control arm bushings were, so I'm not super stressed about that. I'm just trying to get a feel for how the car is gonna behave. Transmission's still a little sad too. Sounds good though. Also sounds like there's a bunch of crap running around in the back. Everything seems to be working. It's definitely softer in this mode than it was in sport mode. I'm gonna put it in sport mode and see, because that should change our steering and shift points and stuff too. Definitely firmed up the steering, but not so much like the jouncing back and forth of the suspension. But man, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with how it's doing. Let's make sure we don't have any noises on full block turn. No. This poor transmission. She's ultra sad. I wish we could go rallycross it right now. That would be amazing. Okay, so I'm over the moon that the Q5 suspension actually fit, bolted right up. We got about 1 1/4 inches of extra lift clearance from the wheel wells. That should translate pretty close to the like underbody clearance. We need to get some better body shielding underneath to make sure that like next time we don't bust another core support. I'm waiting on a couple parts to fix said core support. Once we get that done, the car should be back together and ready to jam. Of course, then we have to do what we probably should have done before we started screwing with the suspension, and that's fix our poor transmission. Okay, so if you decide that you want to do something ridiculous like lifting your S4, the comparable generation, in this case B8, Q5 suspension bolted right up, gave us about 1 1/4 inch lift, which is awesome. So with that, I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again next time. Bye.